Very much for joining me. My name is Anthony Mugenyi. You're doing a very wonderful job on watching TV1, and of course we're saying see the difference. Now we begin today's week with the formal justifications on the list, as we see just after days His Excellency President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni released a new cabinet, and the process of formally now ushering the key government leaders, we're seeing the figures into office, began today. Now we're looking at offering of different states into the first glimpse onto the powers and to the figures that will be taking Uganda for the next 5 years. Now the schedule released for January 1st, that was today, alongside looking at the presidential nominees offering before the relevant seats, and we're looking at different authorities on government transitions for different appointments and legitimacy for the different implications for gather in the space. Now we're having this that happened today earlier on in the morning, and we're having leading on the table, we're having the Deputy Chief Justice designated as we're looking at Chief Justice Moses Akazibwe as Kaumi, whose appearance has been so much marking on to one of the first most significant judicial appointments announced. Alongside, we're looking at crucial figures on the presidential border reshuffle. Now the schedule then moves further on onto number of senior government figures, beginning with the first Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for East African Community Affairs, that is Honorable Rebecca Kadaga, that came into that jurisdiction onto the vetting that happened today. That was Honorable Rebecca Kadaga as the first Deputy Prime Minister for East African Affairs on that. Now followed by the second Deputy Prime Minister and Deputy Leader of Government Business in Parliament, that is Dr. Walter Chigonya, that came into we're looking still into the Deputy Prime Minister and Deputy Leader of Government in the Parliament, that is Dr. Walter Chigonya, that came into the vetting process after Rebecca Kadaga, Honorable, into that tenure. Now we're having the third, that was the third Prime Minister and Minister without a portfolio, that came into that tenure, that was Honorable Lukia Nakadama, that came into the vetting today of the 1st July 2026. That was the third Deputy Prime Minister and Minister without portfolio, that was Lukia Nakadama, that came into that position. Now we're looking, still moving on to the list deep down, as also appearing in as Minister of Education and Sports, that comes into remains as Honorable Janet Museveni, that came into that position as one of the most prominent figures retained in the new cabinet come 2026 to drive us in the next tenure over the 5 years in that tenure. Now the presidency will be so much represented by the Minister for Presidency as Honorable Millie Balnada, as that came into that position of the presidency over the state that will be taking into the tenure of January. We're looking to the next 5 years over a parade that came into that tenure. Now the Minister for Security, that is Honorable Jim Tracy, that came into that tenure, has also been vetted in the condition as earlier on today, June 1st, 2026. Now while the Minister for Science, Technology and Innovation, that is Engineer Jonrad Asimwe, that came into that position over technology and innovation, as scheduled on the appearance into that tenure that will be vetted, that was vetted earlier on today, this morning. Now further on the list, we look at different candidates, that includes the Minister of Kampala and Capital City and the Metropolitan Affairs as Minister Kabanda Honorable, that came into that position to be vetted over January 2026, taking us the tenure for the next push over next from 2026 come the next drive of 5 years. Now we're looking into the drive deeper down. We're looking at the Minister in Office of Prime Minister for General Duties, that is Hilary Onek, that came into that position readily available for the vet over January 1st. We're looking into that benediction. Now ongoing to the government chief whip, we're having Honorable Jane Ruth Acheng that came into as a government a chief whip for that tenure readily available that was into different sectors, but we're looking at the former cabinet, but then coming into as the government chief whip, that is Jane Ruth Acheng that came into that position. Now for Minister of Relief, we're looking at disaster and preparedness and refugees, that is Sam Angola that came into on that position for the date of June 2026. Now, the Minister for Karamoja and for that state and Karamoja affairs, we're looking so much at John Baptist Loki that came into that position as honorable to be vetted. That was so much to be vetted on today of June 2026. Now we're crossing over to Uganda's culture sector. Will be represented so much by the Minister of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries as Mark Tubebazi that came into that position for that wonderful benediction. Well, the government chief whip and legal advisor as Anthony General Sam Mayanja was also expected to appear as into that forum. We're doing a very wonderful job to be vetted, and we're looking at different conjunctures that are coming into that position so much in that tenure. Now the program so much continues on with different nominees scheduled in the late scheduled in the late morning sessions, beginning with the Minister of Energy and Mineral Development. You're looking at Dr. Monica Munesero that came into that position for the Minister of Energy and Mineral Development as Dr. Monica Munesero that came into that benediction. Now we're looking at different sectors still that appeared on today for vetting, where the different docs that were so much into that tenure. Now whose docket remains so much in the central of Uganda's ambition in oil and gas and mineral sectors still related to that tenure. Now also appearing onto the day of vetting today earlier on was the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development as Henry Musasi that came into that position over that will be so much taking us into the next drive, into the next tenure, into the next 5 years as serving onto the people of Uganda on so much on finance and planning. We're looking at economic development still in that tenure, who's overseeing so much into the implementation of government economic agenda and aimed so much on growing the investments and expectation onto as so much critical as we're approaching the financial year, into as so much approaching the budget year and exhibiting so much on how to continue into this directorate. Now Uganda's policy so much prioritized will be so much represented by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, that is Ambassador Andonia Hawe, that so much into that tenure so much represent us into the foreign policy priorities there in that sector, so much vetted to lay alone this morning. While the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development, that is Lieutenant General Henry Atumukunde, that came into that position also so much earlier on this morning listed into the nominees. Now we're crossing over to the health sector, will be so much represented by the Minister of Health, that is Dr. Chris Oriomosi, still in that tenure earlier on this morning. We're looking on so much to different exercises that we carried on, while the Minister of Information, Communication, Technology and National Guidance, that is Justin Kasule, Honorable, will be so much into that tenure of fully accomplishing different nominees, and that day different proceedings are looking so much to that tenure. Now the full program covers so much on the broader execution, still different nominees are different government exercises into the crossover and cross-section of government, bringing together different political exercises still in that tenure, different experienced individuals so much to serve into Uganda, and looking forward so much to exercise our rights in the better tenure and governance of Uganda still in the tenure. So that covers it for now. Now World Today takes a short commercial break. We are coming back with what you should know in South Africa.
Don't miss.
Welcome back, and still on a World Day, and want so much to thank you so much for still joining me in this edition of World Day. And we're crossing over to South Africa. We're looking at fresh concerns and emergencies still in South Africa, following reports on renewed xenophobic and different engagement attacks encountered and targeting onto foreign nations. Particularly, we're looking at migrants from other African countries, still related into prompting on the ongoing alarm and different emergencies into the regional government humanitarian crises still on human rights and different organizations still related in the tenure. Now, among of these suppressing different concerns and members still on South African community on different agendas. Now, many of them whom say that they're increasingly worried about the hostility and the directed towards the foreign-owned businesses and different migrant communities still in that relation. Now we're looking at different different situations still related onto the community leaders. Reports that some of them and different migrants fear now so much to exercise their rights onto safety, and amid so much onto the incidences involving looting, intimidation, and attacks on the shops operated by the foreigners. Now, different latest transitions and latest encounterments have so much dawned onto the responses from Ghana, which began onto so much evacuating the individuals on some of their citizens from the affected areas. Now, following reports of violence, we're looking at threats against foreign nationals and Ghanaian authorities that say the move is so much precautionary related to deeper analysis and engagement measures aimed at ensuring onto the safety and different exercise of their civilians while monitoring developments on the ground. Now, South African policy have so much issued different deployments in several communities where unrest over deployments and reports have increased, with different authorities pledging so much restore order and protect all residents regarding onto their nationality and residing in that situation. Now, investigations have so much been pulled over, launched into different incidences of violence. We're looking at property destruction and the alleged hate on crimes. Now, analysis say that attacks are being so much fueled by the combination of economic leadership, looking at high unemployment still related in South Africa, rising living costs in South Africa, and competition for business opportunities in the same communities. Now, foreign nationals have come out oftenly accused on different critics by taking over jobs or dominating certain sectors in the formal or informal economy. Different claims coming to the different migrants strongly so much condemn on this. Now, human rights organizations have condemned the violence, warning that the xenophobic attacks are undermined and so much onto regional integration and threatened relationship between African nations, still related to several groups that have so much urged South African authorities to take stronger action against these related responsibilities and address the underlying of different agendas and social and economic grievances and different attributions onto the contributions of the unrest on the issue onto the new to South Africa, still related to that tenure. Now, the country has experienced different west waves and different xenophobic attacks. We're looking at these violences from the late 2021, we're seeing this evolving till 2026. Still in the latest developments, where we're seeing different decades in the past a few years. We're looking at deaths, we're looking at injuries, we're looking at displacement of people and damaging of different businesses owned by migrants from countries including Ethiopia. We're looking at Zimbabwe, we're looking at Somalia, Nigeria, we're looking at Malawi and Mozambique, still related on Ghana. And finally, now regional leaders and the different political missions have come out so much to exercise on what should be closely monitored and the situation to calm it down, and so much to affect on the tolerancy and respect for rights of all people living in South Africa, and different degrees on how violence should be controlled in South Africa in that new one. Different contributions that have covered onto the evacuations of Ghana people and different engagements on how people should be addressed onto the high levels of unemployment. We're looking looking at different displacements and fights on violence still related to South Africa. Now that covers it on different engagements on South Africa, and we're looking so much on different contributions that will be coming into by the human rights organizations so much to mobilize the issue and prevent so much on deeper engagements on how people in South Africa and migrants would be responding to this and there. Now crossing over to Afghanistan, we're looking at a worst event that occurred. We're looking at 22 individuals killed as a truck so much was carrying refugees across the area turns over in Lagemani, still related in Afghanistan. Now we're looking at least 22 people have been killed in the tenure and 36 others have been injured after a truck carrying Afghanistan individuals and refugees overturned into Lagemani province in eastern Afghanistan. Now according to authorities that describe this as undertaken vehicle onto different transportation activities, dozens of passengers in the drive were reportedly lost onto the control and different, causing the truck to turn over and weave the road and turn into the mess onto the emergency. Now emergency responders and local residents have pushed onto this and different rescue plans and survivors to rescue the transports and different injured people to the nearby hospital to carry on different investigation on how this overturned and lost 22 individuals on spot. Now officials say that many of the victims were Afghan refugees and displacement families traveling between the province to search for work, shelter, and to look for return on after home displacement. Now several of them were injured and reportedly been in crucial condition and raising fears that are into the death toll that have increased onto the health facilities still related in that area that have mobilized to prevent emergency and treatment of survivors still in that tenure. Now road accidents remain one of the main challenges we're looking into Afghanistan, where different poor roads and constructions have affected this and hindered the overloaded vehicles still in that tenure. And looking at speeding, we're looking at limited traffic and engagement on control, and frequently contributed by deadly crises that come into that deadly phrase. Now the strategy has so much pushed onto once again onto the highlighted difficulties in conditions of their residents and pushing over to different authorities while offering different investigations, and particularly on the refugees. Internally, we're looking at displaced people who are often relying on the overcrowded and unsafe areas of transportation to cross in and out of the country. Now, authorities have launched onto an investigation so much to push onto the cause of the accident while offering condolences to the families of those whom lost their loved ones. And the incident is so much one of the deadliest ever recorded in the early month of June, reported in the Afghanistan year to renew on the calls and importances of road safety and push so much otherwise on different engagements still related in Afghanistan, and reportedly on safety measures to stricter on the engagement on Afghanistan. Now crossing over to Hungary, we are seeing still on two different crises that are happening there. We are seeing a bus carrying athletes that also has been reportedly crashed and 23 injured, and we are so much looking at death reports that are yet to be coming in, but so far reports on 23 that have been injured by the bus carrying of athletes that crashed in Hungary, now killing the driver and injured at least 23 individuals on spot that are so much rushed to the serious health facilities to care into and push on to different health emergency operations to support onto the lives. Now the shocking incident has pushed onto different communities and engagements on how this has pushed onto road safety as we've seen previously in Afghanistan, and relatively so much onto Hungary in the tenure. Now according to local authorities, the bus was transporting athletes, a team of officials that were so much reportedly lost control before wavering off the road and crash, and the emergency services also pushed in quickly so much to dispatch the scene and rescue different teams that walked in freely onto the passengers inside the wreckage. Now, the driver was pronounced dead at the scene, while different injured people were taken to the nearby hospitals for treatment. Onto several victims that reported to suffer onto serious injuries still related to the most unbelievable conditions start of June 2026. Now, police have launched an investigation still on how to determine on cave system under 10 days underground for while I'm looking at 2 people and other remaining missing. We're looking at authorities that have confirmed this on Laos. We're looking at Thailand in this contribution. Now, according to an emergency operation, and group of people that have been so much in the rescue caught inside the cave have been following sudden severe flooding tragedy, and this has been heavy by different rainfall seasons and engagement in the region. Now, the rising water levels rapidly cut off different exit routes in the cave, now forcing onto a large cross-border rescue involvement onto still on Thailand, on Laos, and specialized teams, including the support, was so much seen onto the neighboring place to rescue the individuals on that endangerment. Now, conditions that are so much pushed onto different coordinators that say that the execution of these 4 individuals from the survivors that carried out were so much carefully coordinated, and we're looking at emphasis with drivers and different cave rescue specialists navigated into the raw and narrow endangerment, and we're so much pushing onto the submerged region and tunnels, and that was so much extremely difficult in that condition. Now, the survivors were brought out one by one and immediately transferred to the medical teams for assistance and treatment, where officials say that this has been so much recurrently in the stable conditions but remain under close observation due to the prolonged exposure and exhaustion to the individuals in that cave that was stuck for different days in that tenure. Now, such efforts continue so much to bring 2 missing individuals, with rescue teams expanding their operations into the deeper cave to see how to rescue the system authorities and different governance onto the unstable levels of water and limited visibility, and making it easy for the ongoing search on the highly challenging default on that cave specifically there. Now, emergency leaders and response operations have described the operation as one of the most complex cave rescue in the region. And different recent years, we're looking at citing unpredictable measures of a change and flooding patterns still in the recent years onto technical difficulty across the underground chambers still related in Thailand, on Laos still in that contribution. And now local authorities have so much urged the population and different public to avoid the areas and operations to continue, and the emphasis on exercising on different cautions and optimism for that development, and remaining missing people are so much to be pushed onto the further investigations still to be found alive. And we're looking at these incidences still on Thailand that have been so much into the recent cave development areas across Southeastern Asia, looking at highlighting both risks of potentially being exposed to extreme weather events and the potency of regional operations still in that tenure and cooperation for the highlight, and these different exercises for the rescue teams to meet these individuals onto rescue evacuations that say that 4 individuals were so much rescued, and survivors to push out to coordinatively being out of the phrase of the cave in that tenure and submerged tunnels that are so much under extremely difficulty into the position and maneuvering through. We're looking at those individuals still being rescued by the emergency teams, and the crisis was so much successful, and different objectives on how to rescue the other 2 missing individuals, 4 in Laos or Thailand there. That covers it for now. Now we're finalizing with the USA, and we're looking at Ukraine and Zelensky still involved in this tenure, and we're seeing how this development has been pushing onto, as we see a new military operation that was so much carried out of the agreement that has been signed by earlier by Russia and Afghanistan during the high-level meeting held in outskirts of Moscow, and we're looking at these different developments according to the officials that were so much familiar to this discussion still related on Russia, Afghanistan in the development. Now, the deal was reported so much focusing on strengthening the security coordination. We're looking at intelligence sharing, and furthermore onto different contributions onto limited defense training and engagement on the cooperations between two countries as a military deal for both expenditures. Now we're looking at full details on the agreement, and there was so much reportedly onto how this has been addressing regional security concerns, including the broader stability for both the segments in and out of the tenure that were armed, and we're looking at extremists during the operation in parts of wider region for that development. Now, Russian officials say that they describe this agreement as part of a broader effort to expand strategic engagement and partnership for Eurasia, and furthermore on different particular states for a deeper country investigation onto internal security facilitations on Afghanistan representatives, while others meanwhile are emphasizing the importance of building a practical operation for both the individuals in the tenure and improving on security services still related to that, and pushing so much onto regional stability still related to Russia, Afghanistan. And analysts have noted that this agreement with so much push onto different engagements, we are seeing shifts, geopolitics alignments in the region as the country cross over to different engagements onto the security itself. We're looking at global tensions. However, security concerns remain as a scope of implementations for, as we see Russia related to Ukraine, we're seeing USA related on Iran on that engagement for World Today. Now that covers it for now, and different stories that have been coming in the week. We're seeing that, and we're looking at different adjustments that will be seen into tomorrow's edition of World Day, and we're so much grateful for you, our audience, that have been with us still from the beginning of the edition. And finally, as we're crossing over to the final benediction of this edition, now more programs are coming in still related on TV1. We're looking at different engagements still on politics. We're looking at different engagements on entertainment, and different plans that will be coming in for TV1 there on different pushing to how this organization will be so much entertaining your bedroom, and pushing over to different adjustments for that in that tenure. I want so much to thank you for joining me and looking so much differently, and engaging with you from when we started the engagement to finally as we are concluding this and pushing over to different patterns for now. And this covers it for now. My name is Anthony Mugenyi. I'm seeing you tomorrow. Good night.